Yeah. Good afternoon, and thank you everybody for joining us for our Thursday afternoon Zoom call when we are talking about back to school. Each week for the past month, I've been joined by different health experts, and it has been a fantastic opportunity for the commissioner and I to hear from public health experts, pediatricians, and health experts. Our goal is to try to answer some of the questions that are on parents and students and teachers' minds as we gear up to go back to school. So thank you, Commissioner Infante-Green, for all the work that you're doing and for joining me this afternoon. I also want to thank Dr. Jennifer Jenks for joining us. She's the director of the Access Center at Bradley Hospital and Assistant Director of Lifespan Pediatric Behavioral Health Emergency Services. That's a mouthful. Thank you for joining us. And also joined by Barbara Austin, a licensed social worker, also at the Bradley Access Center. And Barbara is a supervisor there. So thanks to you both for joining us this afternoon. Throughout the pandemic, I have been talking about the toll that this has taken on kids and their mental and behavioral health. And from the beginning, from day one, we've seen it. Depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, isolation, all part of the package, which is inevitable when folks are forced to stay in their home, not leave. Fear abounds. We have an economic crisis. Unemployment is through the roof. We had to close schools. So naturally, this is what you're going to see. You guys early on stepped up to help us to establish or to expand the Kids Link. And I'm forever grateful for you for doing that. For everyone else's benefit, Kids Link is a 24/7 hotline that families can call when their kids are feeling sad or excessively angry, lashing out, having severe worries, or hurting themselves. It's a 24/7 triage line. And Dr. Jenks and her colleagues were fantastic in stepping up immediately to offer that as a statewide service. And I do want to plug Kids Link again right now. If anybody feels that they need to call Kids Link to figure out where to get help, then that's something that anyone can do 24/7, and the professionals at Bradley will help you get to the care that you need for your child. So I wanted to thank you both for doing that. Maybe you could remind me what the number is for Kids Link.
It's 1-855-KID-LINK, KIDLINK.
Great. So if folks write that down, if you're a parent who's listening or a teacher who's listening, because it's almost certainly the case that you're going to have occasion to call that number. Anyway, thank you for joining us. Mental health, behavioral health is top of mind for everybody. In preparation for this phone call, we asked for questions. We received almost 300 questions for today's forum. So this is a topic people are thinking about. I only have you for 20 minutes, so we can't get through 300. I've cherry picked a few that I think represents the broadest categories. So I'll start with you, Dr. Jenks. We know, I think this might be a question from teachers or parents. We all know kids learn by example. They learn by watching us more than by what we tell them. This is obviously an incredibly stressful time for adults, like stressful off the charts for adults, particularly for parents. And now as teachers think about going back into the classroom, anxiety is high. So can you offer adults, parents, teachers, aunts, uncles, caretakers, some advice on ways to calm their kids when they are anxious, and behaviors for adults so that we can, model behavior that kids might learn from?
Absolutely, and that's a great question. One of the most important things we can do is focus on taking care of ourselves. We went through the initial phase of this pandemic, which brought a lot of adrenaline, a lot of very quick movement and action, and a lot of people can rally in that type of a crisis. We're now in a long, uncertain length of time sort of plateau of stress and uncertainty. And I think one of the most important ways to get through this phase, it's going to be to really focus on taking care of themselves. Specifically for what you said, that children do watch what's going on around them, and the younger the child, the more of a sponge they are. So they're taking in what they see, you're taking in affect, and they're taking in behaviors. So if you're working really hard to manage your own, regulate your own emotions, and also taking care of yourself physically, the kids are naturally going to pick up on that and try and do that more as well. It's also going to just provide a sense of comfort, sense of control at a time when there isn't a lot of control for them. They're not making the decisions about school. They're not deciding whether or not they can see their friends. Again, the younger the child, the less sense of control they have. So the more that you can engage them in conversation about the pandemic and how to keep everybody in the family safe, the greater sense of connection they'll have and control over this very challenging time.
So you recommend talking to them about it?
Absolutely. Yeah, at an age appropriate level, but I think it's a natural tendency as parents to protect children and try not to talk about things that you might spark some emotion or you might make their situation harder, but it's actually often the opposite. The more you talk about it, you sort of normalize. We are all going through this experience. We're going to have good days, we're going to have bad days. But by working together as a team and talking about it and coming up with ideas, changing those ideas, you're modeling some excellent coping strategies that will be with them for the long haul. This generation, years from now, will look back at this time and think about what they've learned versus what happened to them.
Yeah, that is the hope. So the next question is from Anthony, and he asked this of you, Dr. Jenks. He says, what are some potential negative impacts of distance learning on children?
So we heard a lot about that at Kids last spring. Kids were thrown into the virtual learning world. We heard a lot of both positive and negative, actually. One of the things that can be difficult is not being around friends. If you talk to pretty much a school-age child, the most important thing they're thinking about is their peers, what their peers think of them, what they're going to do with their peers for activities. So to have that kind of separation is actually one of the biggest challenges and can really impact mental health. It can also be really, really challenging to sustain attention virtually. So I find as an adult, it's challenging to stay on a meeting for an hour, my attention fully focused. I can't imagine being a young child and having so many thoughts going through my mind, and also trying to stay focused on a screen, which is very hard to connect with. And if you think about what most kids want to watch, my children enjoy TikTok, and all of the little soundbite videos are about 10 seconds, 15, 20 seconds long. So their attention spans have really adapted over time, and they're used to a lot more stimulation. So that's a real negative, is it can be very hard for them to listen to a teacher or try and attend in a one-dimensional screen type environment. Some of the positive. One of the positive is for kids who are anxious at school or uncomfortable around some of the peers at school, by being able to be at school at home, that actually ended up being a positive for some kids, being able to be in the comfort of their own home.
What trends did you see as it relates to visits and needs for mental health among kids when we went through the past 6 months?
So in the beginning, we were really prepared for a large influx of calls and need. And I think in that initial wave period that people were really coming together and trying to see what was going to happen, we are now noticing an increase in people calling and people needing safety evaluations. So we're beginning to see that wave of mental health need that we were expecting a couple of months ago. And it's very unusual for August.
Okay. This is one of my favorite questions. I think every parent out there is going to relate to this. It's a question that comes from Mary, who has a 13-year-old, and she says, Dr. Jenks, how do I talk to my 13-year-old about staying vigilant, wearing a mask, washing hands, keeping socially distant, but keeping socially distant inside and outside school, but not so much that he's worried about going back to school, or not so much that he tunes me out? How do I instill in him to choose to follow the guidelines and motivate him without talking about it so much that he gets afraid?
That's another really great question. And there is no one answer, unfortunately. One of the most important, helpful things I think is to set clear and firm household expectations so that everybody in the house is expected to conduct themselves in one way. And again, the more you can engage children and all household members in the conversation, the more helpful it will be. Everybody will feel a little bit more engaged. And then having frequent check-ins. How are we doing? Are people still washing their hands well? Are people using the Purell when they go to the market? Are they doing the things that we agreed to? And are we ready to change them? I know everybody hangs on your word. So, are we still going to follow those guidelines? Are we going to stay a little bit more cautious? Make a decision as a group, and I think you'll get more buy-in. There's peer pressure too, is that oftentimes kids try to influence each other. They tease them for following the guidelines too strictly or not going out or not being allowed to do things. And it's the age-old problem. It's not much different than the peer pressure that was existing before the pandemic. It just has a bigger cost, right? Everybody wants to keep their family safe and their friends' families safe. So just reminding them it's a time to demonstrate leadership, right? By saying this is the right thing to do and I'm choosing to do it for good reasons, they're actually demonstrating some really powerful leadership skills. And hopefully they'll have a positive impact on their peers.
Yeah. I laughed because, Mary, there's not a parent out there who hasn't been tuned out by their children. So
Yes.
if Barbara or Jennifer had the solution to that, that would be a miracle. Commissioner, over to you.
Yes. So Dr. Jenks, we've had a lot of questions about kindergartners starting school for the first time. This will be very interesting time for our 5-year-olds. So our next question is from Kelly. How can we support kindergarten students? How they will have to work with unprecedented level of independence and persistence. How will we meet social emotional needs from a distance? It's very hard for 5-year-olds. So what are your recommendations?
It's hard for all kids to sustain attention and to connect with. Although I have to say the younger the kid, the more adaptive they can be. So I think we have to give a certain amount of credit. I think there's a lot we can do and will do if we expect it of them. One of the most important things to think about, I think, with kindergartners is that their brains are developing based on their social and emotional interactions with others. So some concrete things that people can do is to really make sure that they're having uninterrupted time one-on-one with their children or one-on-one via the screen with their students so that they can be giving that individualized attention, helping the child feel engaged. One of the most important aspects, and again, I'm a social worker, so this is my angle to this, but helping them to feel engaged with learning, to feel like they're an important part of a school community is one of the pivotal things to achieve. So I think focusing on connectedness and emotional coping strategies is going to be some of the most important work to do with these kids.
Yeah. So Barbara, our next question is from Karen. She writes, my 7-year-old grandson lives with me. He's having a hard time dealing with masks, social distancing. He's apparently a very active, lively, gregarious child. So she tries to help him understand the seriousness of COVID. I'm a bit fearful of him bringing home COVID to me. So when I stress what is needed to help the whole family stay safe, he gets scared. So how do I balance the need for safety with his and my escalating fears as school starts to open?
Sure, it's a very good question. I think the biggest thing as parents is that we have to be an example every single day. We have to wear our mask, we have to wash our hands, social distance, and we have to make that kind of a normality every day. Because as he practices it and engages with it, whether they're going grocery shopping or in the house or with, meeting and with friends, anything like that, it just has to become something that's normal and that, you continue to practice safe behaviors. Some of the things is, you can do projects together, you can make masks, different things like that. So it becomes something that's fun actually, and doesn't become something that's scary. When you talk about consequences with kids, it's always age appropriate, because if you're going to say, you don't want to say that, You want to say more like you could possibly hurt somebody, as opposed to, you know, say that, somebody could die or something like that. So you want to put things age appropriately when you talk to them. Kids get older, you can be a little bit more descriptive, but, right now we want them to be able to receive from us and feel some, less anxiety around it. The other thing is just focus on one day at a time right now. I mean, they have to get through every day, and there's a lot in every day for all of us. So we really just want to, focus on, small things, getting ready for school, preparing for that, what our day is going to be like, just kind of baby steps like that. And another thing that's very effective is just like immediate rewards, or having short-term goals or different things. If you wear your mask at school today and you get a good report from the teacher and, different things like that, then, we can do this together when you get home, or, things like that, because that's very helpful in encouraging them and making it more fun instead of scary.
Okay, great. One of the things that I'd like to share is that we're going to have a new app for students that talks about exactly what you just described. Putting on a mask, the procedures. It's actually a game that kids can play about normalizing what's going to happen in school. So that's a back to school RI website for all parents, and it's in multiple languages. So the next question, Barbara, is probably one that a lot of parents have, but this question comes particularly from Claudia. What advice would you give kids that are nervous about going back to school? I'm sure that, it's a top of mind for many of our students. What would you say to them?
Well, one of the things that I say when we get the phone calls and stuff is to just have parents reassure the kids that there's a whole group of adults right now working on this. You got the governor's office, you've got your parents, you've got the school system. Everybody, all the adults around you are putting something together to make sure that you're safe, whether you return to school, in person or not. Another thing is to discuss the rules with them, so for new kids, you're going to practice and discuss the rules and things like that, so they're prepared for it. Other kids, you're going to say, this is a change of rules. We're doing something a little bit different this year, and kind of, prepare them for that, because with these rule changes, it's another way that we can make sure you're safe, your friends are safe, and that you're safe when you come home and see mom and dad. Another thing that works very well is role playing. So if parents are willing to role play with their kids, it allows them to get some practice in certain things that kids may say, whether it's peer pressure or, things like taking your mask off or switching masks or doing different things like that. If you role play with the kids ahead, they'll know how to respond to that and not get pulled into these kind of behaviors and things, and let them know that that's a way that you can stay safe again while you're at school. So
what if the student is older?
Yes, it's a lot harder when the child's older. Peer pressure is a lot greater. So then those are the things you have to stress, of the fact that you're coming home after school and you have a family at home, and it could be some family members or grandparents that live in the home, and that it's a family's responsibility to keep them safe. And so we have to think beyond our friends at school and think, how am I going to keep my family safe? And you're in control of that. Keeping that mask on can do it. It's that simple. Keep the mask on.
Barbara, you mentioned that you are fielding a lot of the Kids Link phone calls. What are you hearing? What are some of the most common things that you're hearing?
Sure. I can tell you off the bat, anxiety. Anxiety is probably the biggest concern that parents have about their kids, and that parents are feeling themselves. So, and they don't really know, how do I support my child around this? So their child's having anxiety about not knowing whether they're going to go to school, or, and if they do, what's going to happen? Are they going to get to see their friends? All of those kind of things. And I think parents are concerned about, how do I support them? What do I do? To make them feel safe and to lower that anxiety. The other thing too is that parents are seeing new symptoms in their kids, such as depression, isolation, deep sadness, those kind of things, which their kids have never displayed before. And they're very scared that these things might lead to kids hurting themselves. And so they call and they want to know, how can we support them? What am I supposed to do? Are they going to hurt themselves? How do I know if they're going to act on these things? And that's all day long. We get those kind of calls. So we talk with the parents about different programs that we offer, different ways we can support them, different referrals and things like that. So those kind of symptoms don't get out of hand.
Yeah. So that leads me to a question. I guess I'll start with you, Dr. Jenks. You know, there's some people say, or a knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, the safe thing is to just stay at home. You know, and of course we all want everyone to be safe. So we say it's just not safe to be in school. Obviously with the virus, bringing kids to school, the thought is that if you have more kids in a classroom together physically, they're more likely to contract the virus. And so, you know, the thought is it isn't safe. But listening to Barbara talk, that's pretty scary stuff. Keeping kids at home and isolated is resulting in situations that are far from safe. So given that we live in a world where there's no such thing as a risk-free environment, and I've become the expert of making choices between two bad decisions, how do you, we'll start with Dr. Jenks and then Barbara, how do you think about it? You know, what is safe for kids? And how do you assess the trade-offs? And what are the real harms to children who are staying home, especially now that they've already been home for 6 months?
So I guess I'd start by saying Barbara and I feel a bit skewed, but we've been working through the whole pandemic within 1 or 2 hospital settings. So we are very accustomed now, or wearing our masks today to sort of demonstrate that you can conduct yourself as you would as a professional. You can interact with, Barbara and I have known each other for a while. You can wear a mask and still conduct your life, your day-to-day life in a normal fashion. But this relates to your last question too, that the more that you go out into the world and you practice being out there and recognizing that every movement, every action, everything that you do is not going to be a harmful one, you become desensitized to the experience. I think people who have been quarantining a long time and have not gone out into the environment are going to be the ones that have the most anxiety going back to school. That being said, I do think there is a deleterious effect of staying home too long, staying apart too long, that kids are reporting hopelessness and helplessness in a way, again, earlier in the year than we would expect, and for totally different reasons than we would expect. They're just not sure what's going to happen next. They just don't know that they can get through this. So our recommendation is so important for the adults to really focus on managing their affect. If kids are in a home and they're seeing their parents extremely stressed or very anxious or depressed, that's going to have an impact on their mood automatically, right? Or if they go to school and their teachers are anxious and there's a lot of stress, again, it's going to be a second wave of affect that impacts them. So we really, as the adults that care, need to work very hard to make our affect so that we can take care of kids. With the understanding that there are going to be some challenges. And I think you do a nice job when you present some of these approaches, that we're doing the best we can in a situation where we don't know what to expect next. And if people can tolerate that, hover in that place, I think anxiety will come down for them and for the children around them.
Are you worried that if we don't get the kids back to school, you're going to continue to see these spikes that you're seeing now?
Yes. Yes, I think this is going to be a very challenging fall if people continue to not reach out. It's our hope that people will reach out more for support services, both adults and kids. The state, I have to say, the DCYF, BHDDH, Department of Health, so many people are creating fantastic resources to support children and families. And I think they're being underutilized for what the need is right now. So my hope is that more people will reach out. There are a lot of preventative services that people want to be helpful and want to be supportive. So I just want to encourage people to call KidsLink or call their local community mental health center, call their pediatrician. Now more than ever, and I know this is one of your platform goals, we're trying to break down the silos that have existed for a long time between people who care for kids. So we're working with pediatricians, we're working with the community mental health centers, and we're communicating in a way that's unprecedented. We have not been at this level of integration for the 25 years that I've been a social worker in the state of Rhode Island. So I'm thrilled to see it happen, really hoping that it has a positive impact on children for this upcoming year.
How about you, Barbara? How do you think about it? Do you think it is always safer to be at home?
I think that all kids learn, and I think that this has been a challenge for kids who need to be, face to face and engage socially and are very good at it and have that, that need and desire for that. There's other kids, like children who may be on the spectrum or something like that, who have a difficult time engaging and interfacing with the computers. So they need more in person. We get a lot of calls about that. Like they can't, a lot of kids can't even do teletherapy because they can't engage like that. So they need to have therapy in person. So, there's a lot of kids that being at home, doing school that way is not going to be effective for them. There's other kids that can do that. And it's actually, there's a smaller percent of kids who are actually doing better with the, schooling at home through that. So, it really kind of depends on the child and how they learn and, receive information and stuff. So.
We have said that we want parents to have a choice. And I think, Dr. Jenks make a point. At first, you might be afraid, but when you do it, over time, it becomes more normal. You realize you can do it. So I think initially some parents who might keep their kids home, over time may become more comfortable. You commented that you have been working at work every day from day one of this. And I want to thank you both for doing that. I can imagine there were days when you were afraid, but you did it. You went to the hospital, you went to people's homes, you went into group homes. So thank you for what you've done and all of your colleagues. And again, thank you for the leadership on KidsLink. I'd like to say we're not going to need it or you won't be busy, but I have a feeling you're about to become very busy. So we are super grateful for you and thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thanks for
Thank
having us.
you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you, Commissioner.